Hello there, beautiful. Welcome back to the Vital Goddess podcast. It is always such an honor and definitely a pleasure to have you here. And if you've been in my world for a while, you've tuned in again. I am so appreciative. Welcome back. And if you're brand new, just tuning in for the very first time, I'm thrilled you're here. And I hope you find something here that's supportive and useful. And I have a feeling today you absolutely will. I have an incredible guest. I'm in conversation with Carla Shohet. She is a UK-based integrative trauma psychologist and nervous system health practitioner with over 20 years of experience. She specializes in supporting cycle breaking humans, particularly women, to heal from trauma, chronic stress, and narcissistic abuse through a powerful blend of body-based, neuroscience-informed, and compassion-led approaches. Carla's integrative work draws on modalities such as somatic experiencing, internal family systems, brain spotting, and polyvagal theory, trauma hypnotherapy, DBT, and positive psychology for post-traumatic growth. She's the founder of Thanara, Trauma Healing and Narcissistic Abuse Recovery Accelerator Program, and the creator of the NTN Pathway Method, a trauma-informed, sequenced, evidence-based model for deep and lasting healing. Carla is also the host of the Time to Unlearn podcast, which is amazing. I'm loving it. Where she shares transformational conversations and all kinds of great information actually about healing from trauma, and education and how to unlearn a lot of the things we've been programmed with, for those who are really ready to stop merely surviving and start to truly live. So, Carla, it is such an honor to have you here on the show. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Diane, for having me. I'm really excited for this conversation.
Oh, yeah, it's wonderful. So, I would love to start with a bit about your own personal story, if that feels right for you. How you got into this work and the depth of work you do is amazing. And I know there's a story behind like your path and how you got on this journey.
Yeah, thank you. So, yeah, I mean, you did a great job of my introduction already. So, obviously, I am a psychologist, but this path for me began probably a long time before I was ever even studying psychology because I was a child. I now know, I didn't know then, that experienced trauma. And like so many women, I became incredibly good at functioning, well, over functioning really, and carrying these invisible emotional wounds inside my nervous system. When I first trained as a psychologist, I was using tools like CBT and kind of cognitive talk therapy approaches, which, have, definitely their place. But as the more I work with women and families and children, and I hit a point in my own journey where I just knew something was missing, and the tools I had just didn't really help me either personally or professionally to reach those places that were hurting most inside of me, in my body, not just in my thoughts. And cut long story short, but basically that's really what led me eventually
Mhm.
to learning about somatic therapies and studying neuroscience and integrated methods that you've mentioned that are more, they're called bottom up approaches. So they're approaches that, use kind of the brain stem rather than our prefrontal logical part of the brain to really access the body, because that's where trauma actually lives. It's not just in our mind. And so it's, yeah, for me, this has been not just a professional journey, but a very personal one. And that's really the reason why I love to work with women. I do work with some men as well, but I absolutely love with, especially working with mothers, cycle breaking mothers, because I truly understand where they're at. And I think often, when we become mothers is when we really kind of get confronted with our past. And I just love sharing the message that, there is the way we feel. And normally that's generally speaking, for the people I work with anyway, it's quite negative. It's not about personality flaws. There's nothing, you're not broken or a failure, or there's nothing inherently wrong with these people. It's just that our nervous system is always doing our best to help us survive. And, the other message that I love to share in my work is that healing is absolutely possible, because I have to be honest, even as a therapist with 20 years behind me, I sometimes did question whether I would ever feel good enough, or I would ever feel, happy enough or comfortable in my own skin, really. And then it is only when I kind of came across a different way of working, an integrative way of working that helped me, heal my nervous system, that really I found the truth, which is our body wants to heal. We just need to have the psychoeducation, and that should be available, in my opinion, to everybody from school age, and not just. And it's not even available to us as psychologists unless we go out there and kind of really research it and find it ourselves. So, yeah, I'm on a mission to come and speak to people like yourself who work with women in particular. I think we can be real leaders in this work. And so, yeah, I love also the work that you do. It's deeply aligned with, what I do, because I think, reclaiming our bodies, our pleasure, and, our power really starts with really understanding how our own past, our own trauma has shaped our relationship to these things in the first place.
I love that you brought up the portal, the initiation into motherhood, and how that can really ignite your journey into healing. That was definitely my story too.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah, where it's like you all of a sudden you become very aware. I think you have this baby, and you're like, okay, so it just was like, wow, what's going on? And like you said, you start to kind of face things maybe that you can kind of gloss over more in your earlier
Yeah.
years. And so I find that true with so many people, that myself and other women I work with, how motherhood is this awakening. And also the perimenopause, menopause portal seems like
Yes.
another
Hi.
time where the veil
For
drops.
sure.
And you were just like, okay, wow, yes, let's dive in. And I'm really ready to heal this and really reclaim myself, reclaim my power, as you said, and my body. It's
Absolutely.
my body,
Absolutely.
and I get to reclaim
Yeah.
it. So,
Yeah, it's funny actually. I was just recording a guided somatic meditation, let's call it, and that was one of the phrases I used. This is my body; it belongs to me.
mm,
And trauma disconnects us from our bodies, and we lose our connection to our senses, sensation, pleasure. It's one of the most difficult things to kind of reclaim our joy and our sensuality as well. Having children, in layers, kind of makes us it forces us in a way to face the stuff that we perhaps was shut down by our brain because it was too painful, because we have to then be, if we want to parent consciously and not kind of fall into patterns that we recognize as, okay, this is what I lived through, I don't want to do the same, but sometimes we still do, because it's, it's our body, our nervous system that drives behavior. It's not our logic, unfortunately, that goes offline when there's
yeah,
trauma. So yeah, it's really important work.
amazing. Yes. And so many of the women, maybe all the women, even listening to this podcast, are cycle breakers. I think that so many people are waking up, humans in general, and a lot of women are really ready. So I love that you focus in on supporting cycle breakers, and who are that courageous, bold step into like, okay, it ends with me, I'm going to do this work. And I'd love for you to speak a little bit about that, but also let's start with what trauma is and what it's not. I listened to one of your shows, your episodes on this. I thought it was
Yeah,
brilliant, and I think more
thank you.
people need to hear about this. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
there's so many misconceptions, both about trauma and narcissistic abuse and what all of that means. And that was really the purpose, the initial purpose of me creating the podcast. And I think one of the people that has done a lot of work around this for, for people to understand it better, is Gabor Mate.
Mm-hmm.
And he clearly states, trauma is not the event itself, is not what happened to you, but is what happens inside of us as a result of an event that happened. So to make it a bit more simple to understand, is me and you could go through the exact same situation, exactly the same event. We could be in a same car accident and walk away with completely different outcomes. So, I could be absolutely, no one got hurt and I'm fine. I can just go back into the car, drive, and nothing affects me. That's not trauma. But you, on the other hand, might be absolutely triggered by getting back into a car and suddenly you get panic attacks and you can't drive or go anywhere by car anymore. So, what I'm trying to say is trauma isn't about the story or the event. It's about how and what your own individual invisible nervous system perceived that you were not able to either process in the moment or integrate that experience itself safely at the time, whether it's because you already had a very full nervous system that was already overwhelmed and there was just another thing on top that just made it even more overwhelming, or you didn't have enough support. Different things with different people, but also what trauma is not is a mental weakness. And that's what I really see especially because trauma has become more kind of a trendy word nowadays and on social media. And it's good, but also the other side of the coin is that people end up thinking, oh, that everything's traumatic, or that trauma is some way of kind of justifying feeling weak in some way.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, trauma is not something you can just get over with time. It's a physiological and emotional injury, and it actually physiologically changes how your body, your brain operates, and your body, because mind and body are actually one, they're not separate.
Sure.
But also, on top of that, what's most important, I think, for people that do identify with having had a traumatic experience is that please know it's not your identity, and it just means that something happened to you, but it's actually not who you are. Does
Mm-hmm.
that make sense?
It really does. That's such a
Yeah.
powerful message to really underscore. It get like you say in your work, it gets stuck in the body, right? And so maybe that's part of why we think it's our identity. I think it has something to do with the fascia. Is that right?
Absolutely, yeah. So it gets stuck in the body literally when we don't have a chance to fully process a survival experience. It actually either freezes the energy or it suppresses the energy, and the energy, that unprocessed energy, stays in your nervous system, like you said, in the fascia, which is this kind of gel-like fiber that wraps around all of our muscle and organs. It stays in the muscles, in the breath, and it becomes kind of stored survival stress, which wasn't able to complete at the time, as I said earlier, either because you already were in overwhelm, or your nervous system just didn't have the flexibility, and it's an accumulation over time. So
Mm-hmm.
instead of it being a memory that kind of belongs in the past, because of how brain structure changes due to this overwhelm, it kind of lives in the present moment, and then it kind of manifests through symptoms like anxiety and chronic dissociation, or pretty much anything that you get
Right?
diagnosed with that is got no
Mm-hmm.
real cause and no real solution. Your digestive issues, chronic pain,
Yeah.
immune
Mm.
issues, or
Yeah.
even just behavioral stuff like explosive anger, or people pleasing and constantly like saying sorry. They're not personality flaws, they're actually trauma responses that are looping in your
Mm.
body. They become stuck and constantly reacting to kind of the present moment with the survival strategies that it learned in the past. So that's why I always say healing doesn't happen by, unfortunately, talking about it. And I wish I could go back to all my client base of before I knew all this stuff. But we
Mm-hmm.
do have to involve in the body, because that's where trauma lives. And why the stuff you talk about on your podcast, which I also had to listen to, it's the breath and movement and pleasure and sound. These things aren't nice to have. They're not indulgent in any way. They're actual essential tools to heal our trauma, because it's what moves that stuck energy from within our body to be able to kind of release, process, and integrate like it should have done at the time that these events, the overwhelming events, happened, and they couldn't.
Thank you for sharing that piece about how this can show up in so many ways. I'm thinking how many women have, say, fibromyalgia, pelvic pain, all kinds of autoimmune things, and the allopathic medicine really doesn't know what to do rather than throw things to
Yeah.
kind of numb the sensation sometimes. So it's just so liberating to, in a way, liberating to say like, wow, this is trauma stored in my body. It's not that I just journaled on that and I'm done. I'm going to put that aside, right? It can be in my body and show up in all kinds of ways. And what I love about what you said, I just felt this permission to let go of shame, shame of
Mm.
like, I'm broken or there's something like inherently wrong with me, and it's like, I love the kind of matter of fact way you just say, no, it's stuck in your fascia and you can release it,
Yeah,
and
yeah, and it is. I mean, I had the exact same experience once I understood this nervous system of ours, this operating system that is just unbeknown, like we just don't know anything about it. Even as people that work with brains and bodies, we just hardly ever get that education. It did lift a lot of my sense of guilt and shame that I was carrying. It just, you know,
yeah, right.
yeah,
Big exhale. Yeah.
yes, yeah.
Amazing. I'd love to talk a bit about how when we don't have the tools to move this through and release and fully process and integrate, what happened, how this might get passed on through generations and how it can have gotten passed on to us through generations as well, generational trauma.
Yeah, that's a really, really important question, because in the healing world, there's a lot of focus right now on kind of self this, self that, and again, I think there is a big misconception about around this word of kind of self healing, because healing is never just about isolating yourself and getting yourself better, because our nervous systems communicate silently, because energy is shared. We're all connected in some way, as social animals, and the work we do individually, each one of us that does the work actually does help to heal the world. It's not just about us. And with regards to intergenerational trauma, and that's the kind of unhealed stuff that gets passed down the generation, is not just inherited through our DNA, but through nervous system patterns, through relational dynamics, attachment styles, and even, behaviors like silence or aggression. And, say that you become a mother and you grew up feeling unsafe or feeling unseen, you might become a mother who's really hypervigilant or maybe emotionally unavailable or anxious, or self-sacrificing, and your children will absorb that as normal.
Yeah.
Even though all those behavioral patterns that you'll display in your parenting are actually rooted in your unresolved survival pain. So, what people say is like whatever is not healed is often repeated. And that's also because of what I was saying, the body's constantly looping, trying to complete survival stress responses that stayed kind of open and didn't finish. And that happens, both subconsciously, biologically in the body, relationally within, in any of our relationships. And, so many of us are carrying trauma that doesn't even begin, it never began with us. It's kind of generational from our parents, or even, depending on your belief system, ancestral. And actually, this is not woo-woo, this is science. Epigenetic research now shows that up to 7 generations it can be passed down. So, but the positive thing is, and I actually believe personally that it can be passed up, not just down, but also the good news because it sounds all like doom and gloom. Oh my God. Ever want someone listening who's especially a parent to feel like, oh my God, I'm damaging my children. We don't need anymore, right? But the beautiful part is that as much as trauma is passed down, so is healing. So, the nervous system, the brain is plastic. Neuroplasticity means that we can rewire, repair our patterns, because that's what they are. They're just nervous system survival patterns that we're still operating from our subconscious, because unless we become conscious of them, we can't change them. And we can actually reparent ourselves. And every time a woman decides to stop abandoning herself and her needs, to feel her feelings, which can be very, very difficult and triggering, it takes a lot of nervous system capacity to be able to do that, or sets a boundary with compassion, or just takes a breath before reacting and actually responds instead from an adult place, an adult true self place, not from a kind of a triggered kid from the past. That all of that is breaking a generational cycle. And that to me is absolutely sacred work. And I think with the work you do, with the women that do the work with you, I really admire that work, because reclaiming your pleasure, this is one of the most difficult things that I find with my clients. We almost forget how to be ourselves and how to be okay being ourselves. So reclaiming that sense of pleasure, or your voice, or your truth, it is an act of intergenerational healing, and it changes everything for, we know, 7 generations after you. So your children, your children's children, their children. It's amazing. You were just sharing, you become a grandmother, and I just sit here thinking in awe, like, what a lucky child that you have as you as a grandmother, really. So yeah. And I see it in my children, they can see if I'm triggered, and my son really loves to go. I have this, I don't know if you've ever seen the Dan Siegel's model of the brain, palm in the hand, and it kind of represents the parts of the brain, the logical part, and the kind of limbic system and brainstem that are more reactive, the emotional parts of the brain and the logical parts. And if I am in my triggered states, because it's not like they go away, they're always there. It's just preventing us from healing, prevents us from staying stuck in those states, but they still happen, unfortunately. Yeah,
of course.
But my son likes to go around, if I'm angry or just maybe agitated, he goes, "Mummy, pum, your prefrontal cortex is gone offline." I'm like, why did I ever teach him? But
I
it is,
love that.
but it's such a massive gift. I have conversations with
Yes.
my children that,
Mhm.
just astound me, and the level of understanding they have, and that gives
Yeah.
them self-compassion and understanding for other people, and they just see the world from a different lens, a trauma-informed lens. I
Mm.
often imagine how a world might be in future if all of us know this stuff.
It's exciting. Yes. And gosh, testament to all the work
Mm,
that you've done, you know?
thank you.
And it's
And
nice to
yours.
see that freedom in your children, right? It's and
Hmm.
the choices they make. I feel like my husband and I speak about this a lot together about like, wow, it took us so long to figure this out. We were
Right.
so,
But we
and I
don't
feel
know
like
what
our
we don't
kids are,
know.
we didn't know, right? We didn't know, we didn't
Yeah.
have the
Yeah.
tools. And now that we
Correct.
started, really working this over the past 20 years or so,
Yeah.
it's so cool to see how our kids are just like leaping into life with a lot more joy
Mm.
than maybe we did. We were more apprehensive and trying to figure
Yeah.
things out. But I love that. Yeah. The cycle breaking. Yeah, I would love it if you could speak a little bit about how cycle breakers need not just talk therapy, but like body based. I'd love to just hear more. You riff on that because you have so much information.
So as I said, because trauma doesn't isn't just about it being in your mind. It's not
Mm-hmm.
about, you thinking about the stories. It actually lives in your body. As much as, and I don't want to dismiss ever, because obviously I've been a talk therapist for many, many years. So it's not
Mm-hmm.
as if it doesn't have a place. I used to use tools like CBT, and I still do. Those are
Mm-hmm.
still integrating. Obviously, there are some therapies, sometimes like brain spotting, that requires literally no talking.
Mm-hmm.
But we talk in therapy, right? But unfortunately, talking alone is using a part of the brain where the it's not the part of the brain that stores the unprocessed overwhelming events, right? So it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
shift any patterns. Insight alone isn't enough because, as we've said, these things that are unprocessed and stuck are in our nervous system. So when you're dysregulated, basically, and you're triggered or you're behaving in a way that you shouldn't be, but you are, and you can't stop it, the parts
Mm-hmm.
of your brain that are responsible for that logical, kind of connected, rational part that also is responsible for our language, for example, they literally go offline. This is the that's what my son was saying. Your
Yeah.
logical brain's just completely gone offline, and you're literally, you're anxious or reactive or disconnected, and your body's still running an old program that in that moment, for whatever reason, is interpreted as you're not safe. I'm not safe, and therefore you're reacting with everything from your past. So, and this can look
Mm-hmm.
really crazy, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
in our world, when we don't have this information about the nervous system and what's happening on the inside, it may look like, an overreaction. So, this is what road rage is. This is what,
Mm-hmm.
people that seem to just kind of be always shut down, but then suddenly explodes is. It's the body, conserving energy in a way by using old survival strategies to deal with what's happening in the moment, but actually it's not dealing with just what is in front of us. It's kind of reacting from old stuff. So that's why somatic and body-based methods are absolutely essential, because in order to heal, we have to teach the body to feel safe enough. Because if we can't do that, and it doesn't know what that means even, or what it feels like, it just will never let go of old survival responses. We need to
Right.
teach it to experience physically in our body, states, new states. Sometimes we've never had experiences of safety, believe it or not. Even in childhood, if you had parents that were
Yeah.
always, incongruent, or, unreliable or unavailable or aggressive or abusive, there's a spectrum. We may have never experienced safety, and safety feels to the brain dangerous. Right? So we need to go through a gentle, titrated, meaning tiny little steps process, where we are teaching our nervous system another way, a new path, a new neural pathways that feel like a new road. And through the brain, everything that's unfamiliar is dangerous. So we have to go slow. We have to be respectful of where
Mm-hmm.
we are in our nervous system. Hence why we need to understand what nervous system even means and what it does, and our own different states within which we get stuck, which are survival states rather than states where we should be living. And real change really can only ever happen, by experiencing, by giving a taste to our body of what it actually feels like to feel safe, and slowly over plenty of experiences, corrective experiences, the brain and the body learn to let go of the old patterns that no longer serve it, because these patterns are adaptive patterns that kept us alive and safe in childhood, because in
Yeah.
childhood, we couldn't run away, we couldn't fight, we had to have people look after us, and we really didn't have much agency. But those old patterns are now no longer serving us, so they become maladaptive, and that's where we need to kind of go into the body and learn to feel full stop,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
because a lot of
Sure.
trauma disconnects us from our body, and it tries to prevent us from feeling the pain of our childhood, because it perceives it as a life threat, basically.
For
And
sure.
again, when we know better, but it's one thing, so we can know something, we can know that we're good enough, but often people get stuck with the behaviors that almost show a different thing, which is showing the inner belief, the somatic kind of experiences that I am not actually good enough. So and get that kind of internal conflict, that incongruence inside, that the heart and the head don't align, and you're like almost in a fight with yourself, in a conflict.
Mhm.
And knowing and feeling are different things. So by doing this work, you end up being aligned with, you're good enough. Of course you are, because what child is ever born not good enough,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
But we had to also learn to feel that we actually are, very different experiences. And it's only
Right.
by working in the body that we can achieve that. And, again,
Mhm.
with your work, we're connected to sensuality and intuition and life force energy. You have to lead with the body. You can't just do that, with the mind, just thinking that you
Mhm.
are comfortable in your skin, that you are, a lot of people don't know what their intuition or gut feeling is saying.
Mhm.
There's no discernment anymore, because if you grew up, for example, in an environment where you're constantly being gaslit, or you've been told that your feelings are too much, your emotions are wrong, or you
Mhm.
disconnect, you don't know what's going on internally. So the first
Yeah.
step is always the body, and then the mind follows.
I love it. I love how you have such a beautiful blend of tools that, yeah, because there's that point where it's really, really helpful to be heard and seen in your
Mm.
story too, right? That was a big part of my journey, having talk therapy for a while, and then
Absolutely.
yeah, and then the combo of that I think is just such a powerful thing. Wow, really good.
Yeah, and we can't do this work alone. It's we do need to be seen and validated, because that's what we lacked when we were growing up often. And as cycle breakers, it can be quite a lonely journey. There's normally, I believe there's almost someone that comes within a family lineage, and it's the first person that will kind of start to question how things have always been. And they can be maybe labeled as the black sheep of the family. Hello again. That's me.
Me too.
You're either, yeah, right, we're either too sensitive or too much or not enough. And when actually we're just, you said it earlier, we're just awake.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
breaking those kind of patterns that have been in the lineage for probably generations before you, it's an enormous amount. It takes a lot of energy in our nervous system. It's courageous
Hmm.
work. Another word that it takes
Yeah.
vulnerability,
Hmm.
and
And you
all
could
of
feel
that.
exiled, right? You could feel like, as,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hmm.
And doing all of that work without external support is just not possible.
Hmm.
No one, I don't believe, first of all, I think all wounding or emotional wounds are relational. Therefore, it needs to, I can go away and kind of go on a retreat and heal myself. And, this is also another misunderstanding, I think, for people. But unless I can then implement that healing into my life within relationships, because we are relational beings,
Yes.
nothing changes. You're often also then having to kind of heal while you're dealing with your own life, whether it's you're reparenting your own inner child, or you're actually parenting
Hmm.
your own actual children, or managing life and relationships and work. It's a lot. And we're
Yeah.
social animals. We need support that nourishes us, that
Hmm.
not just the strategies and the tips and the kind of exercises. We need spaces where we can be held safely and feel seen. And we borrow energy from each other. It's
Yeah.
yeah.
Is that like co-regulating and things like that, right? Where we can,
Exactly.
yeah, support each
Yeah,
other somatically.
absolutely.
It sounds like, is that the main idea of Thanara, right? Your trauma healing and narcissistic abuse recovery accelerator. You have a, like, it's a group program. Am I right on that?
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct. So, I started by working one-to-one with people, and then I realized this work, which is the reason why I started social media in the first place, as I started to learn for myself, for my own personal journey, I started to share on social media what I was learning as a therapist from 20 years and thinking, how did I not know any of this? And actually attract a lot of, in my client base, there's a lot of therapists that come to work with me because I think having been very open about the fact that, I hadn't got a clue really for 20 odd years what I was doing, or not much of it. They feel safe to come and kind of, because we're humans as well. We're not just I
Mm-hmm.
think there's a perception that coaches and therapists are kind of, they've got their perfect life and they're all healed. There's no such thing as a destination called healed, unfortunately. But
Yeah.
being able to feel comfortable enough to even say those things has attracted lots of people in my world that have experienced, that imposter syndrome or feeling like not good enough in their work or whatever. And that, I'm helping them, but I can't help myself with the same things.
Mm,
And even they need help and support, right? I don't think any of us can,
sure.
or I don't think anyone was meant to do this work alone in isolation. It's just not possible, I don't believe. And we all deserve to feel, supported and loved and have, other people that are anchors for us. But that's very,
Mm-hmm.
very difficult when you have maybe trauma that tells you that people aren't safe and you can't trust, so it's all part and parcel of the same thing. And I think, yeah, for me, being able to, obviously there's a cap, isn't there, to how many people you can help one to one, but actually this is systemic work that we need to be doing because trauma isn't just at the individual level, it's in our societies, in our culture, is in our
Yeah.
educational systems, it's rooted in patriarchy and colonialism. It's huge.
Yeah.
So I can be doing my one-to-one work, but sure, if I can find a way to help more people, which is where Thanara was born from,
Mm-hmm.
because I started to do this social media thing and I had no idea about algorithms or anything like that, and suddenly there was hundreds of thousands of people asking for my support, and I was like, oh. So I created this group
Amazing.
program, but what it created is also, a family of people doing this work. Because as I say, being a cycle breaker can be really lonely. You often lose a lot of friends along the way,
Yeah.
that don't like you changing, and family members. So it's important. And it's important. And, I also have a free community called Wild Mother that started in COVID for that same reason. I wanted to support mums,
Wow.
because obviously COVID was quite a tough time for everybody. And yeah, I really believe in community and collaboration. Hence, we're meeting here today.
Yeah. It feels so good in my nervous system just having this conversation, by the way.
Yeah,
It
same,
feels like a nice
same.
exhale, like, oh yeah, sister on the path kind of feeling. It feels really good.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, wow. Yeah, I could probably talk to you all day. So,
Likewise.
is there anything you'd love to wrap with? We're going to link everything in the show notes for your group program, Thanara and Wild Mother. I love that name, by the way. We're
Yes.
on Facebook if you're on Facebook, and other ways to get in touch with
I would like
Carla.
just to say, don't allow, our brain's very smart and it tricks us into thinking lots of reasons. As basically, the brain doesn't like change. Okay. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This is intense work. It can be, but it also can be a lot of fun because you get to connect to people that you feel aligned with. And it feels like, so, so different from, perhaps the life that you're living now, which is possibly not really an experience of living or thriving, which we all deserve. It's more like surviving or even worse, existing. And you kind of have, well, depending on your belief system again, we've got the now. This is the life. So I feel that don't listen to your brain. If you're here listening to this, there's a reason. Just start something. Just start, reach out to me, to Diane, go and find communities that feel like it could be a place where you can start this work supported. There are loads and loads of resources now on the internet. There needs to be a little bit of discernment because unfortunately there are misconceptions and some things are a little bit
Mhm.
diluted, like, the nervous system reset. It's not, there's no button to the nervous system, unfortunately. There's no switch. It's sometimes boring work. It's sometimes tedious and small and very slow, and the brain is used to going fast, so it doesn't like it. It will tell you that this is pointless. There's a lot of practices and modalities and methods and people, go slow, because a lot of people can also go into these things in their kind of fight flight system and wanting to heal yesterday, and then they just kind of bypass the whole thing. And I was one of those people. I did yoga, I did meditation, I did loads of different things, which are actually
Mm-hmm.
really, really good healing modalities. But unless you have the nervous system piece, I think a lot of people it just becomes another coping mechanism to dissociate
Yeah.
and kind of temporarily feel better, which isn't always bad. Scrolling on Instagram can sometimes help you to just kind of calm down in your nervous system. But if it's a distraction from pain, then it's a maladaptive coping mechanism, and it's not helping you, and it's just, hindering you from actually living your life, being present, and, you know, having that vitality that is within, that never
Mm.
goes away. It's available to all of us, because it's like a little flame always waiting to kind of be fanned a little bit, and we can all do this work. And it doesn't have to take money. As I said, lots of free resources. Just,
Mm-hmm.
try to start learning and be curious about learning this new language or old language, depending on how you
Mm-hmm.
look at it, which is the language of the body. And this is, the key to
Yeah.
being able to live differently in a way that feels like it's worthwhile, and it's not all kind of like, heavy and difficult and painful. That's
Mm-hmm.
not how we're supposed to live in abundance. That's my belief.
Oh, I love that so much. And I think your podcast is such a great resource. We'll make sure we link that as well for
Thank you. And we have
exactly
another
those
series
things.
coming out, I would like to say soon, but
Mm-hmm.
it depends on editing, with some
Sure.
amazing, amazing guests on, such as Deb Dana, who is a
Oh, yeah.
polyvagal specialist, or
Yeah.
Dr. Dan Siegel, and many others. So
Fantastic.
look out for that. Working hard to get it
Amazing.
out there. So yeah,
Yes. Well, Carla, thank you so much for being here. It's been an absolute joy and to
likewise.
just serve so many people out there listening. So,
Thank you.
yeah. Well, thanks so much for tuning in, everybody. And that's all we got for this episode. Again, definitely check the show notes to go deeper with Carla. And I will catch you next time. Take care.